Hello everybody, this is King Kong 9100 and today I'd like to get a little personal regarding any and all of my opinions on all things kaiju. Some of these opinions may be controversial and rile certain viewers up, others will just be harmless opinions. But despite this, I want to get out all of the opinions I may have so that way you guys can get to know me better and understand my taste and appeal I see in these films. And we can talk about them in the comments and that way I can get to know all of you lovely folks better. So whatever you may have heard about me regarding what I personally think, I want you to forget about that, throw it all out the window, and we can discuss all my opinions about King Kong and Godzilla. The Monsterverse is currently the trending series in the world of monster movies, and because of this, I think it's fair we start off with it first. I want to start this section off by talking about the movies within the Monsterverse and what I personally think of them, and this will hopefully be very brief. Godzilla 2014. This was the movie that started it all. I actually enjoy this film. I don't think it's spectacular, and I don't think it's the most amazing thing ever, but I do think this movie actually puts in a lot of effort to be something new. I don't think this movie is as bad as Godzilla fans claim it is. I enjoyed the monster action, I slightly enjoy the characters, I think the soundtrack is pretty great, and I adore the visuals. People say the characters suck and that the film is too dark. I agree that the characters aren't good and are really boring, but the darkness issue was fixed with the 4K release of the film from what I've seen. People don't like the cutaways, and hey, I don't like them either, but I understand why they were there, why they were in place. If the film wanted to take the Jaws approach and hide the monster to build up suspense, then the human characters need to be written very well so we enjoy what we're seeing on screen when we're not seeing the monsters. It worked in building suspense and anticipation, but not in giving us likable human characters. I would have at least shown the full Godzilla vs. Male Muta Hawaii fight, and I would have brightened it up. I just would have brightened up the entire film, honestly. I would have made characters and colors really pop, because then you can see there's a lot more potential for an amazing film here. It's got all the elements like Hawaii and Vegas, and it's like a whole giant global catastrophe monster mash, but, there's still something missing. And the fight choreography isn't really anything special or near the level of potential a Godzilla can have when in battle with another monster, but for the introduction to Godzilla in this series, it's forgivable, because in future installments, Godzilla should be able to fight better the more we see of him. So all in all, decent writing, phenomenal visuals, bland characters with the exception of an amazing one, decent soundtrack, entertaining fights, and excellent directing. Godzilla 2014 does not deserve the hate it gets, as it actually tries to be something new, and it's much more of a major motion picture than those other entries in the series really are, as you can tell by the marketing and just the quality of the film. Kong Skull Island. This movie is entertaining to me, but that's all it is, popcorn entertainment. It isn't excellent or anywhere near the level of quality and entertainment a movie like King Kong 2005 is, it's just decent. We get an awesome kaiju Kong in an American movie, there are some thrilling action sequences and visual effects, and the human characters are better than the ones in Godzilla 2014. But I do think the action sequences are short, the fights aren't really as thrilling as they are in previous King Kong movies, it just feels like something's missing. The fights are kind of boring, but at the same time they're entertaining. It's good, but it isn't as great as it could potentially be. The writing is better than 2014, the directing is great, the visuals are excellent, but spotty in some areas. The characters are a bit more likable than 2014. The soundtrack is forgettable, and there's only like one track that I do like, and the fight choreography is better than in 2014, but generally it's still kind of boring. I also don't feel shit for this Kong like I do with other King Kongs, especially 2005 Kong, and I would say it's because of the lack of screen time he gets. But yeah, it's still entertaining to turn your brain off to. It's good, but it's not as great as the previous King Kong movies have come out to be. And honestly, King Kong 2005 just kind of blows it out of the water. So that's what I think about Kong Skull Island. But all in all, it's still a pretty entertaining film. Godzilla King of the Monsters. Ah yes, the movie I am very well known for criticizing. I do not like this movie. And to briefly sum up why, the movie advertised monster fights. Great ones. When you watch the movie, the fights are terrible. They always cut away, the visual effects look really bad, the fight choreography is terrible, and it's basically a step down from the mediocre fight choreography we already got in Godzilla 2014. King Ghidorah is always getting power-ups, and he's just getting destroyed by Godzilla throughout the film until his power-up. He doesn't stand a chance at all. So those are just some of my problems. The fights are awful, but that's what most people are there for. So if the fights are bad, then what does that leave us with? It leaves us with a story that is full of plot holes and is boring as hell. It leaves us with characters that are blandly written and full of illogical choices. It leaves us with a soundtrack that has one or two good tracks as the rest are just filled with obnoxious chanting. This movie fails on every single possible account there is. bad writing, directing, soundtracks, visual effects, action, character, story, cinematography. I got a couple more thoughts for this movie. For people who think Burning Godzilla and the Oxygen Destroyer were like reinvented, they're new and original, no. Doherty didn't just take something and make something new out of it. He didn't build upon the Oxygen Destroyer or Godzilla's burning form. He just stole that idea for the sake of fan service without any actual meaning behind it. He used the Oxygen Destroyer as an excuse to get Godzilla out of the story when it was needed, and then he used Godzilla's burning form as a meaningless power-up to trump Ghidorah's power-up for some bland spectacle. And both of those aspects of the Godzilla mythos went without any actual meaning behind it, and it was only in the movie for fan service. As was Rodan, as was Mothra. Yeah, this movie kinda sucks in my opinion. Now, hang on, it's got some good things about it, and I can find myself enjoying this film sometimes. And yeah, I'll turn it on occasionally because I do enjoy it, but, critically, I don't. And I don't hate Michael Dougherty as a person, but as a director, I don't think he's good at that. I don't think he's a good director. Also, I think the character of Serizawa is kinda overrated. He just stands around with a dumb look on his face, and I wish he offered a little bit more than that. Alright, on to the next one. Godzilla vs. Kong. Now, this is the movie where the monsters start to shine more and where the action for these films start to actually be good. I think the characters in this movie are a lot better than previous films. I think the soundtrack is better than King of the Monsters, but still kind of forgettable. I think the writing is much better, and the visual effects are the best we've ever seen in these movies. And the fight choreography is way better than the previous films. My issues are that Kong gets severely downplayed throughout this movie. He gets saved like 9 times total throughout the film, and he doesn't really hurt Godzilla. Now, we should have seen him be formidable strength-wise. He should have tanked the atomic breath like he has before, which would honestly completely rule out the atomic breath as an option for Godzilla, and it would force Godzilla to think up another strategy, and he'd have to think another way of defeating Kong. And I just would have loved to have seen a lot more of brutal close-quarter fights that weren't so one-note. Because this is my problem with the fights. It's so predictable. Hong Kong starts his Kong's round, and we can tell he's gonna do good here. But then the second the round is over, it's Godzilla's round, and Godzilla wins without much effort. There is no back and forth or struggle of power, there is no subversion of expectations, and that's always been my problem with these movies. Aside from mediocre fight choreography, the writing of the fights are just so transparent. In King of the Monsters, Godzilla wins the Boston fight initially. Ghidorah powers up, and then we know he's gonna win, and then we know Godzilla's just gonna get another power up to save the day. In G14, the fights start as Godzilla's round, he gets teamed up on, and then we know he's gotta get his butt saved. And once he does, he starts to win. When you read the comics Awakening and Aftershock, it becomes even more transparent and predictable since the same thing happens with the monsters Godzilla faces there too. So when you already know how a fight is gonna play out, just by the first couple seconds, it gets kinda boring. A fight should consist of a back and forth, where one character has the upper hand and then the other character gets the upper hand. It should be, honestly, just like a back and forth of that. Not literally just one character has upper hand, other character has upper hand, fight end. Because that's just predictable, and it's not creative at all. So to sum up how I feel about this movie, the fights are way better, but I don't like how they downplay Kong. The visual effects are the best we've ever seen for this series so far. The writing, characters, and story is much better this time around than in King of the Monsters, but it's still pretty bland. And the soundtrack is better than it was in King of the Monsters, but still is kind of forgettable. There's a lot of missed opportunities story-wise, like seeing a Skull Island fight, or Kong swinging Godzilla by the tail or flipping him over, and even seeing more of Mark Russell and see how he was affected by 2019. Kong deserved a lot more respect. The fights could be way better, but this is definitely my favorite Monsterverse movie so far, mainly because it actually delivers on monster action with top-of-the-line VFX. Spotty at times, but top of the line nonetheless. Now we've wrapped up how I feel about the Monsterverse movies, I want to talk about Godzilla as a character throughout his history of films. I want to talk about Godzilla's annoying plot armor and why an overpowered Godzilla sucks in most cases. So while we're still on the topic of the Monsterverse, I'll start with the legendary Godzilla. This Godzilla has plot armor. He has some serious, nasty plot armor. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Godzilla has won against every opponent upon first encounter. The opponents he faces have all been forced to retreat and power up, and only then do they actually stand a chance against Godzilla. This is really fucking lame, because it gets to the point where it's an extremely repetitive and formulaic approach to these films. Godzilla has major plot armor in this universe, as he does in most other movies of his, and it's annoying because that's just one of the aspects of the character that I hate, the plot armor. If you're gonna advertise to me a fight that's a spectacle, I want to see one of my favorite characters live up to that potential. I want a fight that's excellent and brutal and visceral. I want to see this character struggle against insurmountable odds and overcome them. In that case, the odds should have been encompassed within the character King Ghidorah. I wanted to see a character struggle against another opponent that is equal in power and forces said character to think up different strategies when the ones they've used for so long no longer works. In that case, that opponent should have been Kong. And that method that no longer works would ideally be Godzilla's atomic breath. Monsterverse Godzilla did not struggle against King Ghidorah, King Kong, Muto Prime, the Shinomura, or the pair of Mutos upon first encounters. Ghidorah, Prime, and Shinomura retreated to power up. The Mutos retreated to tag team. Kong lost, got an axe, and then gave Godzilla a tough fight. And then Mechagodzilla is set to struggle and possibly lose against a Godzilla that's fresh, meaning he'd most likely suffer falling under the same cycle as the others do. Don't you guys see the pattern? It's just annoying plot armor that Godzilla has that makes his fights super boring to watch. And that brings me to Godzilla as a character. Godzilla has always had plot armor that makes his fights boring to watch. Not all the time, but pretty damn frequently. Look at the Showa era. Whenever the fight got too hard for Godzilla, he randomly gained a power-up to defeat an opponent. Like, where the hell's the entertainment in that? Where are the stakes and tension in that? Godzilla struggles, gains the power of flight. Godzilla's facing a mountain of odds, he gains the power of magnetism. Fucking magnetism. Let's look at the Heisei era. Godzilla struggles against another monster, he pulls out a much stronger version of his beam out of nowhere. Godzilla struggles against Biollante, he pulls out a nuclear pulse which he's never had before. And then that leads to another ton of inconsistencies. Why the hell didn't he use those abilities before? Does that make all the other movies and struggles he's faced before fraudulent? Because now it can be argued he has a much more powerful ability and he would be able to wipe the opponents he's faced previously with the new abilities he randomly was granted in future movies. You see where I'm getting at here? Godzilla has always had power-ups to save his ass. He's always had annoying plot armor. It's a bad quality of the character to me. It takes out all tension in a scene and it degrades a character in my eyes. It takes out all potential for a possibly amazing scene in which a character would rise against the odds. So Godzilla has always had plot armor. Plot armor sucks. Power-ups suck. And overpowered Godzilla sucks unless it serves the purpose of the film or story in question. So let me explain. If Godzilla is being displayed as essentially the devil, just this monstrous abomination who aims to wipe out humanity like in GMK or in Shin or in the Kaiju saga, then sure, it's okay to have him be overpowered. But in movies like the Monsterverse films or the Showa films that don't have this tone, then I want to see Godzilla struggle against opponents and eventually find ways to overcome them on his own. It would strengthen his character. A Godzilla that's overpowered is boring and lame, same with any other character, unless it serves the purpose of the story. If the fights are what's advertised as the main events, then I want to see fights with good fight choreography. No, I don't hate Godzilla, I just don't like when he has plot armor. I don't like his random power-ups, and that's always how I felt about Godzilla's character. While we're on the topic of Godzilla having plot armor, I did talk about how every monster loses to Godzilla initially, which gets pretty annoying and repetitive. But I actually have videos on the channel which talk about how I believe Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and even King Kong were all nerfed in the Monsterverse. And this did spark some outrage because these monsters are huge. So what I meant, and clarified in every video, is that these monsters are nerfed in their own ways, not involving height and weight. So you can check those videos out for further details, links will be in the description below, but to quickly sum them all up here, Rodan and Mothra. I believe these two were nerfed mainly because of their sizes. Mothra is 52 feet in height, Rodan is 154 feet in height. They basically have really bad size handicaps when they're going up against 400-foot titans. And while I would understand it if the Monsterverse was trying to maintain some sense of realism with flying titans being smaller kaiju, then you would need to compensate for that by making them powerful enough to roll with the bigger kaiju. But the issue is that they are relatively featless and honestly quite weak. Rodan has bad durability, little to no fighting ability, and is not strong enough to destroy buildings he hits with full force. He also can't level a city, as not a single building actually topples over in the Mexico scene, and him surviving in lava is a bare bones feat because any kaiju can survive lava and takes much hotter beam weapons. I think Mothra has a huge size handicap and is also not smart in terms of how she uses her powers. Again, please check the video out for more details because I do go further into depth with all of this. King Ghidorah. He isn't nerfed in terms of his size and weight, but I would say in terms of how he stacks up against Godzilla. I've been preaching this since my review for the film came out, but Ghidorah gets destroyed by Godzilla the entire film up until his power-up. He gets one or two good licks in, but ultimately he never stands a chance until his power-up. and his Toho counterpart would actually manage to take Godzilla the distance and really challenge him. Sorry for the bad audio, but I also want to clear my thoughts up on Ghidorah. I don't think he's completely weak or fodder. We see that his gravity beams are his deadliest weapons that blow chunks out of Godzilla's skin. We see that due to his immense weight and strength, he's able to stalemate Godzilla in both charges. We also see that he's strong enough to flap Godzilla into the air with the triple bite chokeslam attack. Godzilla does have some scarring on him in Boston, and it's important to note that this is a mix of battle scars from the past, but mainly new ones from Ghidorah in the Boston battle. So Ghidorah is pretty powerful in his base form, and he's fighting against supercharged Godzilla, who does get stronger, as time goes on. And I wanted to clarify that it's been confirmed Ghidorah dies if all 3 of his heads are removed, or necks, and I also explained that Ghidorah in his base form can't regenerate major limbs like a missing neck. He can only do this when he absorbs radiation, like on the volcano in Isla de Mara, or when he absorbs the energy of the power grid in Boston. In base form, Ghidorah can only regenerate minor wounds like holes in his wings or cuts and scratches, but for major wounds like regenerating an entire neck, he would need to be powered up, or near a source of radiation. I mainly think Ghidorah got nerfed due to his fighting abilities and fighting skill, because he has many strengths, but he still gets pushed around by Godzilla throughout the movie until his power-up. Even if most of the fight's off-screen, he's still getting pushed around no matter what, and any attack that he's really performing gets shrugged off by Godzilla. It doesn't really matter if he cuts Godzilla or if he scratches Godzilla, because every attack he's doing is getting shrugged off. And because this extended to the fight in the Arctic, that's what makes me believe that Ghidorah did kind of get nerfed a little bit in his fighting ability, because King Ghidorah's Toho counterpart was actually a pretty good fighter, who took Godzilla the distance. I hope that explains my stance on Ghidorah pretty clearly. Strong monster, but terrible fighting ability, and that's what got nerfed. My video goes into this with a lot more detail, so please check it out. King Kong. And finally, Kong. Not even King Kong, just Kong. I think Kong is nerfed due to a couple of factors. Obviously not height-wise or weight-wise, just like with Ghidorah, but there are other aspects I feel that are missing from his character in the Monsterverse, thus weakening his character overall. His island was a big one, as he isn't getting the proper experience he usually would facing a variety of different creatures. In Skull Island, he pretty clearly only fights monsters smaller than him, and very few ones at that, while other King Kong incarnations like 2005 fought every day for survival against creatures as big or bigger than himself. King Kong as a kaiju back in 1962 was able to tank beam weapons from Godzilla, and while Kong does survive the beam from Godzilla in 2021, we're not sure if he can actually tank it, survive it, or barely survive it. To me, it looked like he could survive it, but prefers not to get hit by it. We also used to see Kong utilize his brute strength, but in 2021, it seemed like Kong would depend on his axe. Again, the video goes into a lot more further depth with this, but to summarize it here, I think Skull Island was nerfed, which doesn't give Kong the experience he would typically have. Kong himself proportionally doesn't seem as strong as other King Kongs, looking at how King Kong 1962 could tackle, flip, and swing Godzilla, or how even 1973 Kong can exert around 20 times his own weight and lift about 6 to 10 times his own weight. And I honestly believe that the reason these monsters are so watered down is to make Godzilla look good. I think it's a mix of the directors being biased fanboys for Godzilla, as well as Toho possibly placing restrictions on Godzilla and how much he can struggle against other opponents. I say the directors are biased fanboys because Michael Dougherty is a huge Godzilla fanboy, and that's why all the other monsters look weak compared to Godzilla himself. That's why Ghidorah gets slapped around, that's why Rodan and Mothra are in their own smaller leagues. Hell, that's why even Muto Prime constantly retreats battles in Aftershock. After hearing about Adam Wingard and the commentary for Godzilla vs. Kong, I haven't heard it yet, but I've heard other people talk about it. It seems like he's a huge Godzilla fanboy as well, since he thinks Godzilla basically doesn't struggle against Kong and is only mildly annoyed. He thinks Godzilla could potentially beat Mechagodzilla when fresh. So I think the last two directors of the Monsterverse are huge fanboys, and their biases towards Godzilla ended up butchering the other monsters that shared the screen so Godzilla can look good. The reason I say Toho may have placed restrictions on how hard Godzilla could actually struggle with other monsters is really based on Toho's past track record with other incarnations of Godzilla lately. Shin, Earth, Singular Point, Monsterverse, even Snow Godzilla. All of these newer Godzillas look to be completely unstoppable because that's the way Toho wants it. But what that does is basically disrespect the other monsters Godzilla faces in the Monsterverse, especially ones like King Kong, King Ghidorah, Rodan, and Mothra. All these legendary kaiju with important stories and metaphors. It's pretty upsetting. I also believe Adam Wingard said something about Toho restricting Godzilla and that they had to model the fight around these restrictions, so that's something to think about right there. Now I want to talk about my all-time favorite monster, King Kong, as well as Godzilla, who is my second favorite monster. To give you guys a brief history, I was introduced to monster movies via King Kong 2005. I played the game as a kid all the time and always watched the movie, and around the time I was in first grade, I discovered a clip of King Kong vs. Godzilla floating around on the internet. So through my love of King Kong, I was introduced to Godzilla, who had me hooked. From then on, I would rent Godzilla movies from ye old Blockbuster, and I would spend so much time browsing the internet just looking at King Kong and Godzilla stuff. So I grew up with King Kong and Godzilla, and I've always loved both of these characters. This may not be a controversial opinion, but I've always liked King Kong better than Godzilla. That doesn't mean I hate Godzilla, or that I'm some fanboy blind to bias, or that I would even let my love of Kong suddenly dictate how two monsters pair in a debate. It just means that I love both monsters, but if I had to pick from the two, then King Kong would be the one I choose. Whether King Kong is being portrayed via his kaiju story where he's an equal to Godzilla or doesn't die, or if it's his classic tragic story, I've always found King Kong to be more interesting as a character compared to Godzilla. And because I grew up with the 2005 version, one thing I've always loved about King Kong is his island, which is incredibly well made. King Kong has so much character and emotion for essentially being a giant ape, and I think the lore behind King Kong is much more interesting than Godzilla's lore. I feel that as a character he works better than Godzilla does, and I think the humans in his stories are always much more interesting than the ones in most Godzilla movies. I've always found King Kong to be better than Godzilla. This doesn't mean I hate Godzilla, it just means he isn't my personal favorite of the two. I also think Godzilla films do take a lot from the King Kong stories, which not many people seem to recognize. I mean, Mothra is fundamentally a rehashed King Kong story. You have the natives, and you have Infant Island, which is clearly Skull Island. You have a giant godlike kaiju worshipped by villagers. In the Monsterverse, Godzilla has a lair. He was worshipped by an ancient civilization. Like, that's blatant King Kong right there. Especially since Godzilla's never really had a lair before King of the Monsters. So that's just something I noticed as a kid. Kong's influence wears heavy on the Godzilla franchise, and that's really cool. So movie-wise, I love the King Kong films. My all-time favorite King Kong movie is King Kong 2005. King Kong 33 is excellent. The 76 one is a guilty pleasure, but it isn't really that good critically. I would say King Kong Escapes and Son of Kong are my least favorite King Kong films, but they aren't bad per se. They're not even boring to me, I just don't really find the motivation to watch either of them. And King Kong Lives? It's actually underrated. Yeah, it's stupid. Yeah, the acting is corny at times. Yeah, King Kong sounds like a street pervert. But I'll tell you what, it's a damn guilty pleasure of mine that is underrated as hell. The Monsterverse Kong movies are much better and they are very entertaining. One of my favorite TV shows is definitely Kong the Animated Series. The characters are great, the story is awesome, and Kong himself is a badass. I love it and I think it's an underrated series as well. I watch it at least once every year or two. Now on to the Godzilla movies. This may rile many G fans up, but I feel like a lot of the Godzilla movies are mediocre. That isn't to say all of them are, as I do have many personal favorites, but generally, most of the Godzilla movies are kinda bad. The characters aren't that great and are forgettable, and the action is quite poor. I do love the Godzilla movies, and I do think monster action can be done in a better way, and I am still a fan of monster movies, but that doesn't change my opinion on most Godzilla movies being bad. I love them, but I still know they're bad. I feel like most of the fights from the older Godzilla movies aren't as good as many people think. They just consist of hugging battles, the Heisei with the extra hugging and beam spamming, and only recently have the fights gotten better thanks to the Monsterverse and its CGI. But the fight choreography hasn't really been as good as it can be up until Godzilla vs. Kong, and even then, I don't think we got a Godzilla who is as good a fighter as he could potentially be. Way better, but still always feels like something is missing, or that they're always holding back on Godzilla's fighting ability throughout his movies. But hey, when I make my own Godzilla series, I'll show you what a fighter he could really be. So, I think that most Godzilla movies are mediocre, bland, and boring, but there are a handful of films that are actually excellent. I feel like Godzilla's fights throughout the franchise are typically boring and bland, but again, there are many exceptions. Despite how I feel looking at his films critically, I still have a bias towards his franchise, and many of the films I think are just guilty pleasures all around. I still love most Godzilla movies personally. I love King Kong vs. Godzilla. It's definitely in my top 5 Showa films, probably my favorite Godzilla film ever. Some other favorites of mine is Destroy All Monsters, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Mothra vs. Godzilla, War of the Gargantuas, Godzilla 2000, Godzilla Tokyo SOS, Godzilla Final Wars, Godzilla vs. Destroya, GMK, and Godzilla vs. Mothra, Battle for Earth. Yeah, I actually love the Godzilla movies with Mothra in it, and this movie is severely underrated. The choreography was beautiful, the fucking cinematography was excellent. I love Godzilla vs. Mothra Battle for Earth. Another opinion of mine that's definitely going to stir some controversy up is that, you guys are going to hate this one, Godzilla 1998 is a better movie than Godzilla King of the Monsters. Oh yeah, I'm going there. I mean, think about it. 98 actually delivers on the monster action it promises. The visual effects are awesome despite it being 1990 freaking 8. Everything holds up, except the fucking Godzilla design is really bad. But the characters, they aren't good in the movie, but compared to King of the Monsters, I think they're slightly more entertaining to watch. It's better to see the characters out and about rather than confined to one small ass space filled with screens and windows and control rooms. Like, damn, I need some air, I'm gonna get claustrophobic. And despite the fuck ton of negatives in 98, I think it's a better movie than King of the Monsters is. You know what? I'll take it up a notch. Remember Pacific Rim Uprising and Rampage? Those movies were shit. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree on that. But at least they have better fights than King of the Monsters does. Not stories and writing, but better fights. At least the visual effects and the fight choreography and the editing are all better than King of the Monsters. Very little cutting away, stunning VFX, and brutal hand-to-hand combat. And I think the fight choreography in the Pacific Rim films and Rampage are actually better than the fights in the Monsterverse films. The only film from the Monsterverse really competing with the fights from Pacific Rim and Rampage would be Godzilla vs. Kong, which are actually pretty cool, but they're still kind of underwhelming. And on the topic of the 98 Godzilla, I also think that Godzilla the series is actually pretty goddamn good. It's like, really good. I like Kong the animated series better, but it's definitely a close second for me. Again, just a personal preference, both series are great regardless. One thing I've been getting a lot of rep for lately is my stance on Godzilla's alpha status. I made a video a couple of months ago where I say that Godzilla is a bad alpha. I made it clear that he's good at his job of restoring balance when it comes to Titan threats, but when it comes to human threats, he was not good at it. Now, at the time, this was before Godzilla vs. Kong and Dominion, and at that point in the Monsterverse canon, Godzilla would never lash out against humanity even if they did things that were provocative of the Titans and were wrong. The entire video really talks about how humans in the Monsterverse screw things up and that Godzilla doesn't restore balance in that regard, despite people declaring that Godzilla was completely and wholly the restorer of balance. I don't know, I never really jumped on that train because, again, he's never been shown punishing humans who do the wrong things that end up affecting him and his titans. So come GVK, and even in materials like Dominion that were released, we get to see Godzilla punish humanity when they step out of line. And that is what swayed me on Godzilla's alpha titan status. That's what convinced me that he's worthy of the Restorer of Balance title that I don't think he was worthy of before when it came to restoring the balance of Titan and humans. If Serizawa's beliefs are that Titan coexistence is possible, Godzilla should reflect that. So I thought that Godzilla was a bad alpha before GVK and Dominion because he wouldn't restore balance like he was always declared to. Now I think he's a good alpha because he does restore balance. So this wasn't really a big deal to me, but obviously fans take one look at a thumbnail or only make it a minute in and they proclaim blasphemy. And then goes the rumors and the shit talking and the unhealthy slander. It's all the shit that happens that gives this fandom a bad name. And since we're on the topic of the fandom, let's talk about it. A lot of Godzilla fans are obnoxious. If you criticize a film, they will rain down an unholy firestorm because their favorite movie got criticized. I mean, that goes without saying. Some G fans are aware enough to see this, are respectful, and are considerate of others' opinions. But generally, there's a huge portion of fans who are rude as hell. G fans, you guys need to learn how to take a fucking opinion like an adult. There are people who won't like certain movies you do. There are people who will enjoy a certain monster more than the other. There are a lot of people who go against the general consensus. There are a lot of other fans with controversial opinions like mine, but they're too afraid to make those opinions clear because of how toxic the fandom is. Think about it. How many times have you seen comments along the lines of, honestly, I do have some problems with King of the Monsters, or I actually like 1998. Look at all of the YouTube videos that openly criticize Godzilla King of the Monsters. Look at the like to dislike ratios. Look at the unpopular kaiju opinion accounts on Instagram. There are so many fans submitting their unpopular opinions anonymously because they're afraid of people starting a flame war filled with toxicity and slander. So if you stay in the wrong part of this fandom for long enough, or if you have a distinct opinion about a movie or monster that isn't general consensus, it'll take a lot out of you. And it'll shy away potentially new fans. And imagine all of the potential insight and opinions both the fans and even executives would be hearing. Studios do listen to their fans, and when people constantly shit on opinions in a toxic manner, you could be preventing the character of Godzilla himself from growing. Because that one opinion that would sway others wouldn't be heard. One reason I make videos with such blatant titles is because I have a lot of opinions that do go against general consensus, and I also try to make videos about my favorite kaiju that have never really been seen or heard before. It's not going to happen all the time, but generally, I try to bring something new to the table. So hey, I'm not going to drag this out, but just because one person has a harmless opinion doesn't really justify the means of slandering that person in a toxic flame war. But hey, fuck me, right? Alright, as we near this video's end, I want to list off other opinions in a semi-rapid fire format where I'll elaborate if I need to. Power scaling. It would take way too long to explain here, so I'm going to leave a link in the description below if you want the more detailed explanation. But basically, I understand monsters can hit as hard or harder than nukes, but I don't think they can actually destroy an entire continent in one hit because they simply don't have large enough ranges to do so. So when I see people saying, this monster is easily multi-continental, I don't think that monster can actually destroy said continents in one hit if they wanted to because their ranges aren't large enough to do so. Godzilla PS4 is kind of a mixed bag. This game is a guilty pleasure of mine, but I do think that it kind of sucks. It's pretty boring with bland gameplay, but it's made for the fans, and as a Godzilla fan, I can actually enjoy it at times. But I do enjoy the Atari games way more, and I think Destroy All Monsters and Save the Earth are some of the best games I've ever played in my life. Monsterverse realism and scale. Here's an opinion I have many like to take out of context. I think that in Godzilla 2014, the CGI looked amazing due to the lighting, the smoke effects, framing of the monsters, and the detail of each character model. When you see people referring to weight and scale like I do, they're most likely referring to how the monsters are framed with such scale, filming from low angles with the occasional wide shot, the weight of each footstep being captured through the environment's shaking and the skin of the monsters jiggling. There's a lot of anticipation in each move the monster makes, and I think Godzilla 2014 and films like Pacific Rim capture scale perfectly. And I think the Monsterverse would benefit from filming from more low-angle shots and focusing more on these things like capturing weight. I had a problem with how Godzilla ran in King of the Monsters because it didn't feel weighty enough, but in GVK, Godzilla runs just fine. It's filmed from a low angle and it looks breathtaking to me. The Monsterverse is slowly bringing back realism and scale. I can only speak for myself, but when I refer to realism, weight, and scale, I mainly refer to important aspects of film such as the framing and composition, the VFX quality, the lighting, the cinematography, the quality and fluidity of the animation itself, and all of the simulations involving smoke and debris. Not, monsters wouldn't even exist, they'd crumble under their own weight. No, you can still have Ghidorah flying, you can still have giant monsters. All better weight and scale means is for these monsters being captured in a much more realistic fashion to our eyes, for them to look real. The original Monsterverse Titans. I love the new Monsterverse Titans and I want to see more of them. At first, the monsters we got from Monsterverse were pretty bland during the 2014 days. The Mutos seemed bland and basic. Shinomura was kinda cool but only appeared in a singular comic with bad illustrations, in my own opinion. We got Kong Skull Island, which gave us the Skull Crawlers and a couple other different creatures, and these crawlers looked phenomenal with ILM's VFX. These creatures start looking more badass in their designs, and critically, it's met with a lot more positive reception than the Mutos were. Then in the King of the Monsters days, they stepped it up a notch. The Muto Prime is a lot more badass than the Mutos. We have original titans like Skyla, Behemoth, and Methuselah, and we even get to see another monster called the Queen Muto, or Barb for fans. Behemoth was a huge hit and such an awesome monster considering how few mammalian kaiju there are save for King Kong and King Caesar. Methuselah is a badass monster with a sick design. Skyla, kinda basic at first, but after seeing her more in Dominion, I can say that she's definitely starting to grow on me. And now we enter the GVK days, where we're given even newer monsters like Amuluk, Tiamat, a giant piranha-like titan fish monster thing, and even the Monsterverse Kraken named Nikika. We're given the Warbats, which look awesome. We get a revamped larger Skullcrawler, and it looks so badass. We have Camazotz, one of the most badass monster designs I have ever seen. I love the Monsterverse Titans. They're so creative, and it shows how much of a vast improvement these creatures' designs are becoming. I'm hoping to see more Titans that are creative and awesome, and I want to see more Titans that can challenge Godzilla like how Skyla and Tiamat did. I want to see monsters larger than Godzilla like Tiamat underwater, so we can see Godzilla take out larger opponents through his intelligence, as well as his actual strength. I love the new Monsterverse Titans. Figure lines. If you're a follower of this channel for a long time now, you may be aware that I'm a pretty avid figure collector. My favorite Godzilla figure line is the SH Monster Arts line. I have a couple X Plus figures here and there. I have most of, if not all, the Playmates King Kong 2005 figures. I have a lot of Bandai figures, the NECA figures, a couple highly detailed minifigures for both the King Kong and Godzilla series. I have quite a few statues, which are honestly my prized possessions, and I'm not even afraid to admit that I invested in the full Prime 1 Studio Godzilla vs. Kong diorama. I have all the movies on an 8TB hard drive, I've collected most of the King Kong 2005 books, and I have a lot of other Godzilla books and films. I fucking love collecting King Kong and Godzilla stuff, and I don't plan on stopping soon. I do have a video on SH Monster Arts coming out soon, so that'll be fun to make, but I do think the line can improve on the kinds of figures they release, since it seems like we have dry spell after dry spell only to be met with remold and repaints. It gets pretty annoying at times, but it is still generally my favorite figure line out there. And finally, my favorite monsters. Some of my favorite monsters include King Kong, Godzilla, King Caesar, Rodan, Anguirus, King Ghidorah. We got some Monsterverse titans like Camazotz, Behemoth, Methuselah, Amulek. In the Toho library, I'd say Monster X is fucking awesome. Destroya, Space Godzilla, Biollante, Hedorah, Megalon, Orga, the Gargantuas, the IDW Zilla / animated Godzilla. But those are just some of my few favorite monsters. In the King Kong Rogues gallery, I'd say the V-Rex for sure, the Pteranodon, the Queen or King Terrapusmordaxbat, Mechanicon, Gorosaurus. From the animated series, definitely Kairos, Ominous, and a lot of the other hybrid monsters, which were really cool. And the Heisei Gamera trilogy is a phenomenal work of art, and I completely adore the series. Gamera is awesome as hell. Alright everybody, that seems about it for now. I might make a follow-up in the future if I think of any more. But for now, those are all of my kaiju opinions that I can think of. And now you guys can get to know me better. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these thoughts. And most importantly, I would love to hear your opinions as well. So please leave them in the comments. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more. This is King Kong 19100 signing out. Until next time, bye-bye.